Hello, and welcome to the National PTA Candidate Speeches and Queries. I'm Tina Hartman, Chair of the National PTA Elections Committee. In the recordings that follow, you will hear speeches and candidate query responses from candidates for the National PTA President-elect. The candidates were recorded the week of April 26th and May 3rd. This video was edited to place candidates in a random order established prior to the recording. Candidates were recorded live. No candidate was given the questions in advance, and no candidate was given an opportunity to repeat their speech or query responses. In addition, candidates did not hear other candidates' speeches or query responses during the recording process. During the recording process, members of the Elections Committee members acted as timekeepers, and candidates were able to watch a timer as they spoke. Time started when a candidate began to speak, and when time expired, the parliamentarian signaled the candidate to stop speaking. To maintain our policy of impartiality, Kay Cruz, National PTA's parliamentarian, moderated the speech and queries.
Marcus Ivy will speak for 5 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you. I'm not here to make some sweet promises that can never be fulfilled, or to provide some inspirational speech that has no plan attached. I'm here to seek your vote to head up an association that I have grown to love, and that, in all honesty, has fallen on tough times. But this is an association that is so sold into the very fabric of American public education that it would be a travesty to lose it. Imagine tearing PTA out from that fabric. It would create such a large hole that it would take many other associations just to fill that space that this one association has filled successfully for over 124 years. So the saying goes, actions speak louder than words. So let's talk about my actions and the receipts that I have to show for them. I owe PTA so much. PTA put a lot of time and money into training me. I would have never run for the school board if not for the skills gained from here. Running for the school board has given me the connections that I have where I can call up any of the congressmen or congresswomen from state or federal in the state of Colorado at any given time. And all of them are staunch advocates for education. So with all of that, it's only fair that I circle back and give to PTA what it gave to me: leadership, knowledge, understanding, and direction. I have led the stabilization of a school district that entered into a $31 million deficit before me or my other running mates were even elected. The four of us that were elected became officers, and immediately we got smart. And remember that, smart. Smart goals about the school system by reaching out to the very foundation of the district. So we started at the bottom and we worked our way up. We went door to door. We made events, community events, and not a board event. We made our meetings about students and not about the perceived needs of the board. In other words, get rid of the adults and focus on the needs of our students. Over the last 3.5 years since I have been on the board, we've not only stabilized the district, but we became close as one could get to becoming COVID-proof. We did not have a decrease in our budget because of COVID. We provided raises to the teachers and staff. We hired over 100 mental health professionals to come into all of our schools full-time, all the while keeping our budget flat. That is the work that we are known for. And it started when I was elected as president of the Board of Education. I came to the community humbly, and I embraced the reality that we were in at that time, that we couldn't do it alone. As your president-elect for PTA, I envision an association that leads from the bottom up. Leadership starts with our families and our students, from our local units, our regions, our councils, our state congresses, and finally, the elected members of the board. In that order, we must actively co-create a community of action through individual ideas and values that are different from our own. We must seek out and learn from diverse perspectives, staying open to the unfamiliar and uncomfortable, and recruiting those who represent the non-traditional communities we serve. As your president-elect, I envision an association that requires us to champion data approaches. We need to make families feel comfortable and welcome and let their voices be heard and supported. As your president-elect, I envision an association that creates SMART goals. And there it is again, SMART goals. We need to find common purposes grounded in specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-sensitive goals. We must learn to think outside the box and be creative about it. We are enough. We must maintain hope, even in the face of brutal facts that may not be in our favor. It's as simple as that. Reaching out to the very foundations of our association, becoming inclusive to diverse ideas and voices, and finding common ground as a community as to how to move forward to our desired outcomes. So that's it. That is my plan, backed by a proven blueprint with the receipts to show for it. So the only question that remains is, who's down to take this journey with me? My name is Marcus Ivy, and I would very much appreciate your vote. Thank you.
And thank you. First, as president-elect, how do you see your leadership role in terms of working with the president?
I see my role as president-elect to be there to support and, quite frankly, to do whatever is required of me, whether that's go conduct a meeting, whether that's lead a meeting, whether that's take over some information, whether that's going out and advocating on behalf of PTA. I'm actually there to be there as a support basis, number one. Number two, I'm also there to learn. I want to see what the direction and the vision is of our president so that I can also make sure that my vision will align with that, so that when the baton is passed to me, that I can continue running that race successfully. And so I believe the role of president-elect is to be all things that the president can't be at that time, whether that's conducting meetings, whether that's convening meetings, whether that's appearing in her stead. I'm there to support, and that's my focus. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, as an association, we are focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. How will you, as president, bring our leaders together to focus on the needs of every child?
Well, I've been really privileged that I actually train on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'd actually train attorneys through this very process. I also train attorneys on implicit bias and micro and macro aggression. So I'm very familiar with this aspect of DEI. I was part of the group in the state of Colorado that created what we call EDI, which is just putting equity in front of diversity, where we are creating a program where we're requiring all attorneys to get training every 2 years on DEI issues. And so for me, it's about, number one, making sure everyone's voice is heard from the bottom up, which is what I talked about in my speech, making sure that everyone has a voice and a seat at the table. And from that point, finding out those ideas, whether different or the same, and making sure that we can find common ground to move forward. But we're going to do it in the lens of inclusivity first, followed by equity, and then finally followed by diversity. And it's not just diversity in color and skin color and racial makeup, it's diversity of ideas, it's diversity of mindsets, diversity of beliefs. That's how we come together if we are truly about making sure that everyone's voice is heard. And that's how I'm going to do it, from the ground up. Thank you.
Thank you. How will you ensure that PTA remains relevant to today's families?
Well, for me, the first thing is that blueprint that I talked about. I think we have to come out as a board humbly, number one, and be direct about what we're facing, what our situation is, what our prognosis is at this stage. And we have to be open to being able to accept various ideas, but also being able to accept help from others. And so with that, for me, my first steps is, if you will, appointing people when I become president to the board who have diverse ideas, but not necessarily within the ecosystem of PTA, but folks who are outside the ecosystem who have great ideas and who have been successful in their own endeavors. That's the first step. Step number two then is to reach out to all those congressmen and congresswomen who I have relationships with and ask them to come and talk to us about how we can be more advocacy focused when we go to the Hill and what things we should be looking for and asking for, but also making sure we bring in those families who have different ideas than our own, bringing them to that table as well, bringing them to that conversation as well. That is my focus. And that's what I intend to do. That's how we will remain relevant, because we're always going to stick our nose in those businesses, anything that deals with education.
Thank you. What impact has the current climate had on PTA?
You know, it's hard to say, actually, because PTA is so diverse in terms of its ideas and its background and the membership itself. All I can say is that I can only speak from my lived experiences and what I've experienced and the things that I've been doing. I think the impact on PTA has probably been one of great sorrow. We've seen a constant barrage of new school shootings. We've seen a constant barrage of people of color being killed, many of them unarmed. We've seen a constant barrage of such great division amongst our government. So the impact has been great. And how do we find common ground through that mess? And I think that's what the impact has been. It's just been devastating. So at this point in time, us as leaders have to be able to focus and figure out, okay, what can we agree on? And what can we move forward on? Whether it's one thing or 10 things, we have to be able to find that. But the impact is so great that we probably have to have that uncomfortable conversation of what happened, acknowledge it, deal with it, and find solutions to move forward with it. And that's how you deal with the major and damaging impact of the current climate. Thank you.
Thank you. Please expand on your previous response and describe how families have been affected as well.
Sure. You know, we all have a unique background as to how families have been affected. I can tell you from the point of view of one who is a part-time judge, I see the effect upon families. Also one who continues to practice part-time as an attorney, I see the effect upon the clients that I represent. And so the effect on the various families has been major. I represent a lot of folks who are indigent when I'm doing my criminal side of things. And so for them, the impact has been devastating. Between jobs, loss of benefits, loss of health insurance, that effect has been great. But also for those who may not have lost those things, they've got kids who may be despondent, who may be unattached just because they haven't been in school full time. They haven't had that ability to work and be with other students. And so with respect to families, it runs the complete range. And so it's all about trying to find that center point and figure out what can we do for each side to get them to a point to where they're comfortable, where we can lessen the impact, where we can lessen the impact of being out of school for a year, where we can lessen the impact of the division amongst all of the areas of that we have to deal with. We have to find that common ground and that common space. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvonne Johnson will speak for 5 minutes. You may begin.
Hello, I am Yvonne Johnson. I have been involved with PTA and public education for almost 3 decades. Making a difference on behalf of all children inspires me. I got involved much like many of you. There was an issue at my child's school that needed to be addressed. Many of you may not know that my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. When I was young, he shared stories with me of his escape from Auschwitz, one of the worst Jewish concentration camps. He taught me to never give up and to fight for what I believed in. Fast forward, I am now a mother with her first child in school. I quickly discovered that the Jewish holidays were not observed on the school calendar, nor were they considered an excused absence. I decided to put my grandfather's teachings to good use by joining the best child advocacy group in the district, the PTA. After successfully building a coalition of parents and partners, our school district amended the calendar. That combination of caring parents and advocacy strength of the PTA was a powerful alliance. I found my voice and my advocacy ally in the PTA, and I have never looked back. That commitment to the PTA and its mission has brought me to this point, speaking to you as the slated candidate to be your next president-elect. Close to 125 years ago, our founders began our advocacy journey, and PTA has been there to represent families ever since. I strongly believe membership is about building relationships and mentoring future leaders. We need to understand why PTA is losing membership and enact measures to stop the decline. We must demonstrate our value even when we are not in physical buildings. We need to listen to the younger generation of families about their needs and discover new ways to engage all families so that PTA remains the family engagement association of choice. This has been a very challenging year for many of you, myself included. The old adage, but we've always done it that way, no longer applies. The pandemic has forced us to find new ways of connecting with and serving our membership. Leadership is demonstrated by the ability to be flexible and offer solutions when things are challenging. I congratulate and thank you all for being such amazing leaders during this difficult year. I too lead with a positive outlook, and I am a realist who sees the benefits and lessons offered in every situation. A true leader rises to the occasion and forges forward. I am that leader. As the Vice President of Advocacy, I have led my team in writing crucial and timely position statements to help you in your advocacy efforts. In addition, we undertook PTA's first virtual legislative conference, a complicated task, but it was a rousing success with close to 800 members in attendance. I'm so proud of my team and for all the leaders who attended to advocate for the children and families of our nation. Serving as an officer has provided insight into every area of our governance. An officer must lead with integrity, courageous thinking, loyalty, and accountability. I have the skills and competencies needed to lead PTA. As a member of the Governance Policy Task Force, it has given me a strong voice in our board policies, streamlining them to fit the needs of our diverse association. PTA must continue to prioritize its commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion. We must be intentional. We must be bold. We must be courageous. We must embrace and capitalize on our differences by embedding them into the national PTA strategic vision. That is how we will ensure a positive future for all our members. PTA needs to be proactive, not reactive. Martin Luther King Jr. said, a genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. When elected, I will be learning from and serving with Anna. I see us as true creators of consensus that will make us an extraordinary team that will be revolutionary for PTA. We are both passionate leaders that ultimately want one thing, to move our association forward. I understand and value the commitment it takes to be a national leader. Time, commitment, and energy. I have all three. I am results-oriented and strategic in all my work. I pride myself in being extremely responsive and a problem solver. I am not afraid to speak up on any issue, policy, or project. My passion, drive, and willingness to listen and learn makes me distinctively qualified to serve as the next president-elect. Together, we can take PTA into the next generation of members. As my grandfather taught me, I have never and will never give up on the things I believe in. That is our children. It is you. It is the PTA. I am ready to continue the journey as your next president-elect. My name is Yvonne Johnson, and I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
And thank you. Your first query, as president-elect, how do you see your leadership role in terms of working with the president?
Well, I think I alluded to this in my speech. I feel that a president-elect is almost like a president in training. You work side by side with the president, and you try to work together to make the decisions that are going to move our association forward. I see my role, if elected to president-elect, as someone who's going to take those 2 years to learn from the president, to learn and to embrace the role. I feel that Anna and I would work fantastic together because we served together for years, state presidents and on the board together, and then as officers together. And I know that the 2 years, the reason we have the role of president-elect is to get you ready to be the president. And so I see that as something really important. I also see my role in leadership and to helping lead the board and to lead policy and to make changes that we might have to make difficult decisions. And so I see that as, all encompassing as the role as president-elect. But most importantly, I see the president-elect as an officer of this association. And I would be proud to be serving in that role. Thank you.
Thank you. As an association, we are focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. How will you, as president, bring our leaders together to focus on the needs of every child?
Well, as president, it's the most important thing to always remember about the needs of every child in our nation. it's as far as diversity, equity, inclusion, I do think that we need to improve our skills in making people feel inclusive, to making people feel comfortable at the table, to recruit leaders that are going to feel comfortable sitting at the table as a decision maker. It's time to be bold. It's time to be courageous. It's time to be intentional with our diversity, equity, inclusion. I think that we are on the way. We have an amazing policy that we've just adopted, our purposes in DEI. And I think that's a really good first step. But I think moving forward, we have to take that information and apply it. We have to make sure that our board is trained on it, that our governance is trained on it, and that our state leaders are trained on it. We can't just have things and not provide training. So in order to do this and be successful, to move us into the next generation of leaders, we have to be very intentional with our DEI. Thank you.
Your third question: how will you ensure PTA remains relevant to today's families?
Okay, so everything that we do in PTA seems to be reactive, and I believe we should be more proactive. We need to give our future generation of PTA leaders, our members, the people that are going to grow up in our association and go through the, being a local leader and then a region leader and then a state leader and then into the national governance. And we have to remember that we are not the PTA of 10 years ago. Just because it worked 10 years ago doesn't mean it works now. So we need to work together to collaborate and figure out ways to engage those families, to make them feel valued and to listen to them. I think a really important thing that I know we did on my legislative committee this year is that we asked our members what they wanted us to advocate for when we were putting the public policy platform together. And that's important. It's important to bring them together and hear what they have to say. There's no way that we're going to be able to move forward and engage the younger families and the future families unless we are listening to them and bringing them to the table and having a seat at the table. Again, we have to be intentional with that. Thank you.
And thank you. Your next question: what impact has the current climate had on PTA?
I'm going to assume you mean by the current climate, meaning the last 14 months, which has been the pandemic. And it's been tough. It's been challenging. Lots of things, we have faced, all the things in our country with the schools closing and then reopening and everybody on the different sides. And of course, racial injustice and unequitable practices going on within our country. And we just need to to move forward, we need to look and see what we did before might not work now. And right now, to me, one of the things that I feel is a positive is that we have been able to do things we never could do before. We just had a legislative conference that had 800 attendees. If I had told you that a year before that, you would have thought I was crazy. There's no way we can have Hill visits virtually, and we're about to have our second virtual convention. And what that does is it engages more members, people who wouldn't be able to travel because they didn't have the money. And so I feel like that's a positive, that we have learned to do things virtually. But there is something to be said about being together. PTA is about relationships, and it's important for us to continue remembering that.
Thank you. Your final question: please expand on your previous response and describe how families have been affected as well.
So our families have been affected. We have children who have not logged on to a computer since a year ago, March. Where are those children? We need to think about that. We have our families are, some of them are unemployed, they lost their jobs, or they're at home and they're doing their jobs plus educating their kids because everybody's virtual. We're thankfully moving into, the next phase where we're sort of transitioning back to reopening of schools. But families are facing, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, and families are facing, obstacles. Maybe some are uncomfortable sending their kids back to school. There's also, we need safe and supportive schools, and our families are facing a lot of challenges with their children who are facing mental health issues that aren't getting the supports. And so we're, with the CARES Act money and the American Rescue Plan money, we're hoping that a lot of our school districts in our country are going to be able to support those children and their mental health, even the mental health of the adults. So the whole family unit has changed greatly. And so I believe that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.